Hello everybody, welcome back to Study is Key. That is, welcome back. If you've been here before, if you've not been here before, welcome to the channel. Hopefully you'll stick around to the end of the video and then subscribe to the channel so you can stick around for future videos as well. You're not going to be seeing much of me that is present me today. I'm going to begin a clip here in a few seconds of Ben from Cleave to Antiquity and Company, where he and his guest, but this clip is basically only Ben talking, he's talking about the intercession of the saints. That is, the idea that dead believers are still alive in heaven and praying for the saints who are still on earth. And Ben from Cleave to Antiquity appeals to a very particular passage, one in 2 Maccabees chapter 15 that I've actually made a video on before. So I'm just going to play a segment from this stream where Ben talks about 2 Maccabees 15, and then I'm going to play a clip from my older video in which I discuss 2 Maccabees 15, and we'll see why the appeal to 2 Maccabees 15 is really bad. So without further ado, let's head into today's video.
Like, they're relying on some level of ignorance, either in themselves or in their listeners, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, that's what it is. But, you know, the beauty of that is once you give these people a platform, then everybody gets to see it. And thank you, Ash, for bringing that out of them. Really, I mean, it's just them displaying their own ignorance. But I wanted to just display this, even if you were to look at some other sources. So just read 2 Maccabees 15, verses 12 through 14, okay? This is Onias. He's dead in this verse. He's a dead guy, okay? What he saw was this. Onias, the former high priest, a noble and good man, modest in bearing, gentle in manner, distinguished in speech, and trained from childhood in all that belongs to excellence, was praying with outstretched arms for the whole Jewish community. Then in the same way, another man appeared, distinguished by his white hair and dignity, and with an air of wondrous and majestic authority. Onias then said of him, "This is a man who loves his fellow Jews and fervently prays for the people and the holy city, the prophet of God, Jeremiah." So you've got two dead guys praying for Israel right here in the Maccabees. I mean, it doesn't get much more clearer than this. I mean, you've got it right here in practice. And this is someone who is alive witnessing this happen. And they're recounting this thing that they've seen. So if you had the right Bible canon, this wouldn't be such a big deal, right?
Now, let's go over to Jimmy Akin and see what he has to say about 2 Maccabees 15, verses 6 to 15. In an article entitled Quick Answers on Soul Sleep, Jimmy Akin writes, quote, "Do we have any evidence of human consciousness after death and before resurrection? Indeed, we do. There is the passage in 2 Maccabees where it is revealed that the prophet Jeremiah is dead, but nevertheless, quote, loves the brethren and prays much for the people and the holy city," end quote. And that is a reference to 2 Maccabees, that's supposed to say 15:14, not 5:14. Anyways, this is the text in question. 2 Maccabees 15, verses 6 to 15 reads as follows, quote, "This Nicanor, in his utter boastfulness and arrogance, had determined to erect a public monument of victory over Judas and his forces. But Maccabeus did not cease to trust with all confidence that he would get help from the Lord. He exhorted his troops not to fear the attack of the Gentiles, but to keep in mind the former times when help had come to them from heaven, and so to look for the victory that the Almighty would give them. Encouraging them from the law and the prophets, and reminding them also of the struggles they had won, he made them the more eager, and he cheered them all by relating a dream, a sort of vision, which was worthy of belief. What he saw was this. Onias had been high priest, then in the same fashion another appeared, and Onias spoke, saying, 'This is a man who loves the family of Israel and prays much for the people in the holy city, Jeremiah the prophet of God.' Jeremiah stretched out his right hand and gave to Judas a golden sword, and as he gave it, he addressed him thus, 'Take this holy sword, a gift from God, with which you will strike down your adversaries.'" End quote. Now, the very obvious response to Jimmy Akin is that while 2 Maccabees 15:14 does say, hundreds of years after Jeremiah's death, that Jeremiah, quote, prays much for the people in the holy city, verse 11 reveals that this is said of him in a dream, a sort of vision. And plus, this response coheres with the obvious implication of, or the implication behind, again, a mistake on my slide. This response coheres with the obvious implication of the words of 2 Maccabees 12, verses 38 through 44. Now, that said, let's try to steelman Jimmy Akin's appeal. First of all, we might say that although Jeremiah prays for the people in Judas's dream, the text says that it was a dream, a sort of vision, which was worthy of belief. And secondly, we might say, well, in verse 8, we're told that Judas exhorted his troops to, quote, keep in mind the former times when help had come to them from heaven, suggesting that the dream of Jeremiah praying might have been a way of communicating that Jeremiah really does still pray for the people in real life as well, constituting help from heaven at the present time. Now again, we have the steelman on the left here for you to reference if need be, and we're going to have the refutation here on the right. And we're going to begin with the first point of the steelman. Jeremiah is also said to give Judas a golden sword in verse 15, saying to Judas, quote, take this holy sword, a gift from God, with which you will strike down your adversaries. Now, is it worthy of belief that Judas was going to strike down his adversaries with the very sword that Jeremiah entrusted to him in his dream? Of course not. When he woke up from that dream, the sword was gone. It wasn't there, right? It was a dream. So the fact that the dream was, quote, worthy of belief doesn't mean that any specific detail therein can be taken to match reality. What's being referred to as worthy of belief is what the details in the dream symbolize. The significance of Jeremiah praying for the people in Judas's dream is that it calls to mind the last time Jeremiah prayed for the people. God responded positively to his prayer by saying that if the people stayed in Judah, he would protect them from their adversaries. Jeremiah 42, verses 1 to 12. Jeremiah praying in Judas's dream symbolized that God would grant Judas and his army victory over their adversaries too. And this fits well with 2 Maccabees 15:9, in which Judas is said to have encouraged his troops, quote, from the law and the prophets, with the dream serving as a nod to affirm the encouragement they had taken. Now, Jeremiah praying for the people at the time of Judas Maccabeus is no more real than the scene in Pharaoh's dream, in which 7 sickly cows came up out of the Nile and devoured 7 healthy cows. See Genesis 41, verses 1 to 4. Now, what was worthy of belief in Pharaoh's dream was what the scene symbolized, not that sickly cows were coming up out of the Nile and eating healthy cows in real life. Now, let's look at the second point in the steelman. In verse 8, we are told that Judas exhorted his troops to, quote, keep in mind the former times when help had come to them from heaven, end quote, suggesting that the dream of Jeremiah praying might have been a way of communicating that Jeremiah really does still pray for the people in real life as well, constituting help from heaven at the present time. Now, here's my refutation. Appealing to verse 8 fails for several reasons. The first of which is that the righteous dead, like Jeremiah, were not thought to be in heaven, but in Hades. And you can see 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 23 for confirmation of this. So the connection between Jeremiah praying for the people in Judas's dream and the notion of help from heaven is completely unjustified. Again, Jeremiah would not have been thought to have been in heaven, but in Hades. And so trying to connect this verse about help from heaven to Jeremiah praying makes no sense, because even if Jeremiah were still praying, it wouldn't be from heaven. And the second point is that based on 2 Maccabees 15, verses 22 to 23, and you can compare this with 2 Maccabees chapter 8, verses 19 through 20, it's clear that in speaking of help from heaven, what's in mind is God lending a hand in battle, not a human praying in heaven. And this also fits better with Judas mentioning former times of help from heaven. So in light of all these considerations, the steelman fails to stand up to scrutiny. So 2 Maccabees chapter 15, verses 6 through 15 offers no credible support whatsoever for the notion of a conscious afterlife between death and resurrection. And therefore, it is still most reasonable to conclude that 2 Maccabees denies the notion that the soul remains conscious after death, just like Sirach. Again, see my previous video if you're interested.
I wanted to just display this. 2 Maccabees 15, verses 12 through 14, okay? Ananias then said of him, this is a man who loves his fellow Jews and fervently prays for the people and the holy city, the prophet of God, Jeremiah.
While 2 Maccabees 15:14 does say, hundreds of years after Jeremiah's death, that Jeremiah, quote, prays much for the people in the holy city, verse 11 reveals that this is said of him in a dream, a sort of vision.
Like they're relying on some level of ignorance, either in themselves or in their listeners.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what it is. But the beauty of that is once you give these people a platform, then everybody gets to see it. Really, I mean, it's just them displaying their own ignorance. I wanted to just display this and fervently praise for the people and the holy city, the prophet of God, Jeremiah. I mean, it doesn't get much more clearer than this.
Verse 11 reveals that this is said of him in a dream, a sort of vision.
So if you had the right Bible canon, this wouldn't be such a big deal, right?